Hey booze, hey, do your blankets feel like super glue in the morning? Well sis, it's time to shake them off. Welcome to Wake Up Happy Sis, the show that jumpstarts your day with a bang. We're strolling down these self-care streets as we navigate the maze of wellness and healing. We're helping you live happy, healed, and whole. And we do it all with a hearty dose of belly laughs for good measure. Stay tuned and get ready to wake up happy, sis. Welcome, everybody. It's your girl, Leanne Dulce here on the Wake Up Happy Sis show. And, as always, we broadcast live on KCCR Cityscape Radio, where we're changing the narrative for our Black and Brown people because we are always telling our stories our way. Today, we're diving into Familial Fireworks, and we're talking about how we gonna get through these holidays without hurting somebody, right? How are we going to turn sometimes often negatives or conflicts in families into harmony and peaceful, happy family gatherings? And I happen to have such a special guest that I'm honored that she is able to grace our presence, Dr. Ajetta Robinson of the Legacy Wellness Group. Now, she is also known as the Experts Therapist. She's a grief and trauma therapist, an award-winning and best-selling author of the book, The Gift of Grief, a practical guide on navigating loss. And we're definitely going to talk about that because I need to know all about this book, and you guys do too. She is also a TEDx speaker, an international speaker, and an income strategist. In short, Dr. Ajetta has it going on. So, how are you today?
I am well. How are you? Thank you so much for having
me. I am doing well over here. It's been a week. This last week has been so much stress. But you know what? I made it through. It is Thursday. We almost at the weekend. And I'm doing good.
Good. Excellent.
So before we jump in, let me say hey to all our Instagram people. We just started live streaming to Instagram. So we got some new people over there that are joining us. So I want to make sure I say hey to y'all over there for coming in. Oh, there goes Sharonda, my co-host with the most.
Welcome. Hey there.
Welcome. How are you doing today, Sharonda?
Pretty doggone good. Because it's Thursday.
It is. I love Thursdays because that is so much closer to my Friday. And these people, this week was coming out of payroll. So for one of my other clients, I do payroll and stuff. And when I tell you payroll, open enrollment, it is so much stress that goes on around the end of the year. We're trying to wrap up the books for the year. Like, oh my goodness, I don't like this part of the work. But somebody got to do it. So before we start, Dr. Ajetta, why don't you tell all the people a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for such a warm welcome. As you mentioned, I am a grief and trauma therapist. I practice in Maryland, Missouri, and DC. And I really kind of came to this work and specializing in grief as a result of not recognizing that I had non-death related losses, right? Grief that showed up that wasn't as a result of someone dying, and didn't really have words for it, but it was absolutely showing up in my body, right? From a chronic illness perspective, from a productivity perspective, you name it. And so it really wasn't until I did my own work that I was able to be a better clinician and a better servant leader, right? Because this affects all areas, not just my personal life, my parenting, my relationships with my family, with friends, just how you walk in the world when you are walking in a space with armor on that you don't even know that there's spaces in which you don't need it, right? And so I am a trauma and poverty disruptor. And so that started with me, right? doing my own work and really recognizing the things that I may have inherited just as a result of being born, right? Being born in a family system with some unhealed stuff, some, generation
Mhm.
stuff we don't talk about. And so I spend, the bulk of my time working with clients, both from a direct practice perspective or clinical perspective, as well as my consulting clients who are growing their business, really talking about the ways that unresolved grief and trauma and mental health and wellness kind of just show up on that journey, and the way that we can kind of take our joy and our power back by doing really
Yeah.
intentional work, right? So that's who I am.
And I think during the holidays, that is, it's even, I think it becomes even more of a thing because even though we're talking about familial kind of issues, you also have that loss of those people who, one, can't be around their families for good and bad reasons, right?
Mm,
Those who may have other areas of loss where the holidays just bring about a lot of stress. It brings up a lot of hurt and trauma and things that they've been through in their life. So, I think we definitely all need some assistance sometime. And what better than somebody, one, who knows what it's like, what those feelings are. They've been through it, they've worked through it. I tell people all the time is, so often we're running from our past, running from the trauma, and we've got to be like the buffalo. We got to head into the storm. The only way we can get through it is to sit, process, actually fight through it. So I
mhm.
love that you do that. And I see, tell me about that book back there. I told you, tell me about that book back there now. Come on, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that this is actually not the book that I was intending to write. And what I recognize is the book that I was intending to write would have allowed me to hide in plain sight, whereas this one requires
Mm.
me fully present. I wrote this book as I was grieving the loss of my grandfather. And I thought I was done writing the book. And then my oldest brother died. That's important because the chapter on social media and grief would not have been in this book had my brother's death not been so public, right? And
Mm.
family members find out about his death because of social media before we were able to
Oh,
do the. And of course, that I was like riled up and I was like, but
Yes.
other families experienced this, right? It was also right around the time that Kobe Bryant died, right? And the whole
mm.
people that also died in that accident that weren't named and their families were grieving. And so how do
Yes.
we kind of navigate not only as public figures, but how does grief show up in those spaces as well, even when it's not our own loss? And so this book was really written for people who may be grieving that don't have words for their grief, who aren't coming to therapy. Everyone's not coming to therapy, right? Everyone's not ready for therapy. There
Yeah.
aren't enough therapists. And then some of us are bearing witness to the suffering of others, and we don't know how to help them. We might unintentionally be saying things that are actually hurtful and harmful because it's what was said to us, right? Like one of the things is, oh my God, like they're in a better place. Well, let me tell you who that doesn't comfort. The person who's actually grieving, right? It actually forces them
Mhm.
to move along in their grief journey, or at least diminish their expression of grief because people keep telling them that they shouldn't be sad because their loved one is in a better place. Well, I'm not there yet, right? And that doesn't make me any less of a good
Yeah.
Christian that I'm mad at God about this decision that he made, right? And so this book was really designed for folks who are grieving, that wanted a way to name what they're experiencing, especially when we're grieving people that are still alive. And
Yeah.
that's a big one. We're grieving the gaps in relationships, the gaps in identity, the gaps in where we are versus where we thought we would be, right? So there's a chapter on divorce. There's a chapter on grief in children. We do such a not good job, right, of
Mm.
recognizing the grief in children because we think that it looks like adults, and it doesn't, right?
Yes.
And I touch on the grief that we have, that we carry with us because we weren't honored as grieving children and how that shows up in adulthood. So it's, really dynamic and very accessible and conversational, but it came about because of all the conversations that were happening both in the therapy room, in my personal life, and in the larger space, that I was like, I think we really need to kind of wrap our arms around people to help them be better companions to themselves and to others who are navigating grief, because none of us are exempt, right? Some of us are just doing this process with better skills, better tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and more empathy. And I think that's accessible for all of us. And so I decided to make it accessible to all of us, right? And so that's kind of what led me to write the book, kicking and screaming, right? But it's like, do I know enough? Have I done enough? That's the imposter that sometimes, we experience that isn't real, but that shows up nonetheless.
And I think I love the part where you're talking about um, how grief and trauma shows up in children. And I think sometimes as parents, we're only doing what we were taught.
Yes.
And what ends up happening is we dump so much more trauma and stress on children in our attempt to what we think is help them through it. And we leave them with so much more trauma than help. And especially in Black families, when I was growing up, we didn't talk about things like getting help, therapy, mental health. They weren't topics. What happened in our house, in our family, stayed in our house and in our family. Um, and as children, you stayed in a child's place. There
Mm-hmm.
really wasn't a space for us to grieve openly about our own losses, not necessarily just losses of people, but experiences and things that have happened to us that made us grow up faster than
Yeah.
we should have, right? And who do we go to when we're experiencing those? And I kind of feel like we just had a total shift in what the topic was going to be about today, but that's okay. That's how we roll. That's how we roll, and things change, and the conversations that have to happen kind of come out here on the show. So let's talk a little bit more, maybe about maybe the grief and the loss that people might be experiencing coming into the holiday season, because you can have a house full of people, all your relatives and family there, and you are still grieving, you are still experiencing loss. Sometimes it's loss of connection
Yeah.
to the people that are right there in your
Yes.
face.
Yes, absolutely. So I
Mm.
think a lot of times some of the things that what I see and just hear, right, in the larger space, is this loss of tradition. I remember what Christmas was like and the routine and the ambiance and the feel and the schedule when Christmas was held at grandma's house, right? And my grandmother now has dementia, and so she's not able to do any of those things. And we also don't have Christmas at grandma's house because, I mean, I'm recovering from, this wicked cough and whatever this virus that's been going on, right? And she's
Mhm.
COVID twice as someone that's bedbound and doesn't leave the house. Some of
Jesus.
that is about protection, but there's loss even in doing what's in the best interest of other people, right? And so
Yes.
what we're finding is that we've lost some tradition. Sometimes that shows up. Grief shows up in the details. Love does as well, but grief absolutely shows up in the details. Like the hot water cornbread is there's something. I'm using her recipe. I'm even using her cast iron skillet. I think it's like, Grandma, come put your finger in the batter. It's you. It's
It's
like
her.
you, right? That makes this thing that it is, and there's nothing that replaces that, right? We've lost historians. We've lost our stories because they're locked up in, for our family, a brain that doesn't function the way that it used to. So my grandmother can't tell some of the stories that she used to tell around Christmas time because
Yeah.
dementia robbed her of the present moment a lot of the times, right?
Mm.
And we're
Mm.
experiencing that in different ways, right? Our stories are different because of who's not present around the table. We have had long-term 20 and 30-year marriages disintegrate. That
Mm.
changes the dynamics of what family looks like around the table, right? It changes, the routine and the schedule, that there's some kids that midway
Yes.
are being shuffled to another parent's house, right? Like there's so much that's happening. But what about the adults that are in the room that you're present, but we're not acknowledging the elephant because it's not the right time to do so. And yet it's sitting right there because there's this unresolved, unaddressed thing. And so, some of us play nice. Some of us dread the holidays because of the cousin that isn't going to be able to hold their tongue, or the aunt that's going to comment about your weight or your singleness,
Mm-hmm.
or your body or what have you. And so we're anticipating um, the uncomfortable expression or exchanges. And so we're not even fully relaxed going into those spaces, right?
Yeah.
We're on guard, so to speak, because we're not sure what to expect, because we've lost tradition, we've lost routines, we've lost the sense of normality, right? And I think those are some of the symbolic things that folks are in the relationships and the details that folks are navigating, that they're not like, what do I say, right? Because I can't, quote unquote, check that aunt because they're still my elder, right? And so the
Mm-hmm.
power those that show up at these times, I think, can get acute.
I definitely agree. I think back to when um, I was growing up, and even in my adult years, we still had Sunday dinners at my grandmother's house. Okay. When it was holidays, the reason why the vast majority of us know how to cook the way we do is because everybody had a thing that we cooked with my grandmother, right?
Mm,
Um, and so when things changed and she was not able to do that, and she's passed now, but it changes the dynamic, right? The people that used to come around that no longer do or have that connection. So you have that loss there. We definitely have the loss of tradition, right? Or even just the loss of relationships with people that maybe she was holding those things together. Because
mm,
there's people that in my family that I don't like and I will not associate with. You can be in the same room with me, but now there's that uncomfortable silence because I'm acting like you ain't even there. So I
mm,
can't even be
mm,
comfortable in my own family setting. So a lot of times I don't go home,
mm,
right?
mhm,
I stay here. I'll stay here by myself. Sometimes I don't even the holidays, I don't really celebrate holidays anymore. It's
mm,
not like I raised my kids. My daughter has her own kids. They have their own traditions and stuff. And I kind of feel like I did my part. Now there's really no, I don't, there is no tradition for me. If I cook, it's just really because I want to eat dressing. That's the only tradition there really is the dressing, the food. The rest of it, I definitely feel that loss of tradition, of those familial connections, um, such that I just kind of squirrel myself away at the house.
mhm,
Hmm. Well, my son and his friends, they have this thing called Friendsgiving, and that's a
Mhm.
nice little name of what I was doing well before he was born, back in my army days and stuff. And it's where you get to, choose the people that
yeah,
you get to spend time with, and they don't
Mhm.
necessarily have to be related to you on this holiday season and stuff, because in the military you're often away, from your
mhm,
loved ones. And because you're working so closely with your teammates and stuff, we become family. We forged
Mhm.
a family out of necessity and of career and things of the nature. And sometimes your friends become your family, and sometimes your family becomes your friends, because I find, the older I get, I'm discovering or rediscovering new dynamics of my family members. I'm all about family, but there was a time when I was younger, when I was a teenager, where I just wanted to get away from my family, and that's why I went into the service. But
Mhm.
it's the my family is so much more extended because of the service. And you you create your family where you are and stuff. And so for you, Leanne, that's something You know, the tradition is what you make it. Tradition has it seems like it has different dimensions of definitions, if you will,
Mhm.
and it can you can create it where you are with who you're with and who you run to whenever. It doesn't have to be a family member. It can be those relationships that you forge and you create because you chose them, not because you're related to them. And
And
blood does not make family. It just
Yeah.
doesn't.
absolutely. And I'd love to add that the beautiful thing about traditions is at some point someone started it,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Somebody got to
so
be first.
yes, someone has to be first. And so we have traditions, that I have with my kids that I started. They weren't ones that I had when I was
Mhm.
right, but they honor the way that I want to, lead in my family and how we want to live our values out loud, right? So when I
Mm-hmm.
don't for Christmas, we create and have our own traditions that we do every single year that my kids look forward to doing, that they get to
Mhm.
participate in, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important. Those are the things that I want. That's the piece about disruption, right? So if there is this gap and this rub that as a result of what is no more, what are the things that we desire and value that we actually can infuse, right? And sometimes it
Mm-hmm.
does require that we kind of spearhead some of those things. The question that I ask people that have um, gaps in relationships, if those gaps are ones that they would prefer to close, because not all gaps, like some gaps exist and they create breathing room, and that's totally fine, right? And then there's other gaps that's like that's an open loop I'd like to close. And so if
Mm-hmm.
that's the case, what I often ask them, what's the cost for you if that loop doesn't get closed and then the opportunity goes away? See, one of the things that we take for granted is that we have time. And the thing that grief reminds you is that you're on borrowed time, right? Time is
Yes.
a gift that is unopened by so many people. What would you do today if you were able to recognize that you have a finite amount of time, right? And the thing that I find that people um, navigate or struggle with the most in the aftermath of loss is the undone, the things, the phone call they didn't make, the text message,
Mm-hmm.
the apology that they wish they had an opportunity to offer, right? The reconciliation that they thought would happen somewhere down the line without any plan. It's the undone and the unsaid that I find people grapple with the most and struggle with the most. It is the guilt, right? It is
Yeah.
one of the single big indicators that I find people who are able to heal and do the healing work and find meaning in life post loss, and the folks who get stuck and that loss becomes traumatic, is the undone, right? And so those are the things that I encourage folks that have a gap or an open loop, as I like to call it. Someone has to disrupt whatever that pattern is of
Mhm.
disconnection, of unforgiveness, of disconnection. Someone has to disrupt it if we're going to close a loop. Or sometimes we don't need to close the loop. We need to get it, spin it in another direction. This is the way we have been going and it doesn't work for us. What would it look like if we did this thing, right? And so be curious about the things that, if they remain undone and unsettled, would cause you to regrieve all over again, right?
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
sometimes,
Man.
sometimes that means forgiving people who aren't sorry, but that doesn't mean that you have unopened access, right? We still
But
get to have
but
that.
doctor, forgiveness is for you, not for the other person. It took me
Mhm.
years. I wasted so many years not understanding or internalizing the definition of forgiveness. It's about me, not about them. They cannot be sorry all day long, but
Absolutely.
the point that I made it right and reconciled it. I'm a bookkeeper by trade, reconcile, but it's the it's the I made it right for me
Yes.
before the person left this earth. Now, the person
Mhm.
left this earth without making it right with me. That's not my problem. That's something they got to take
Yeah.
up with their higher power. I have nothing to do with that. But I am right. I I made it right by reconciling and forgiving and just letting it go. Because when you're carrying around this grief, or no, when you're carrying around grudges or unhealed feelings, blah 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 blah, it's like a suitcase full of mess that you're lugging into your daily life because you
Absolutely.
refuse to
Mhm.
forgive somebody. And when you finally get to the point where you set this doggone suitcase down and you refuse to pick it back up because in your mind you've reconciled yourself to forgive, I because you can't, when you have toxic people in your midst, if you cannot have them in your inner circle where you can have an adult relationship or conversation with them, you got to speak to them in the spirit and just, hey, I forgive you, I love you. And you can even tell that person, but if they're not ready to forgive themselves, that's not your problem, it's theirs,
Now,
always.
right, but I think sometimes people get mixed up with the fact that I forgive you does not mean you are allowed back into my life, right?
Yep,
Yes.
that
That
part.
does not mean that I have to forgive you and allow you to keep being in my space, access to my space, especially if it's a toxic person and they have no feelings of being sorry about the trauma or whatever that they put upon you. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this family member, but I forgave them a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean they maintain access to me,
Right.
right?
Sure.
I have
Right.
my set of
Right.
boundaries and things that I won't do. Now, if I see her, I will talk to her. I'm not like that. I know how to be civil, cordial, and all that, but we will never have the relationship that we had before. You
Mm-hmm.
don't get back that access. And it doesn't mean that I'm upset, I'm mad. I just know that sometimes a tiger is a tiger. And as
Mm.
much as we want it to be a house cat, it isn't. And we have to know what it is. And then you make those those determinations of how a person gets to engage with you and be in your life based on that. I have so many other great things going on. I can't even be focused on the negativity of somebody else who isn't sorry or isn't ready to to move in a different way. I'm okay with that. I see you for who you are. I love you. She's my family member. I love her. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to let nobody harm her,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean that you still get to have that same place that you had in my life, right? So I gave up the anger and all. I gave that stuff up many, many years ago, right? But we learned the lesson. I try to look at everything in terms, even with loss, I try to look at things in terms of what is the lesson and how can I apply what I'm learning to my life. How can I make myself a better person? Because that's all I strive to do is be better than I was yesterday, right? To be able to navigate trauma, loss, grief, the holidays. Because sometimes I don't want to be around other people, and people sometimes don't get that.
Mhm.
That sometimes I don't want a friendsgiving. I get invited lots of places and I'll go if I want to, but sometimes I really want my new tradition to be that Christmas, pretty much the whole month of December, I am on a vacation somewhere. Like I've raised my children. My daughter is very grown, has her own child. I've done those things, been there, done that. I feel like it's me time, you know, and I love what you were saying, Dr. Jetta, about sometimes we have to spearhead the new traditions that we want to see. I'm trying to be the rich auntie that just flies in. Hey, y'all, I just came back from Bermuda, from Barcelona, from wherever. And they're like, where are you going now? That's the new tradition I am trying to build. So,
Yeah, and I think we get to do those things in ways that honor the life that we want to live, right? And I think that's important. I'm always mindful of making sure that we are navigating and making those decisions from a place of kind of our healed self. Because sometimes we
yeah.
make some decisions based on, you know, one of the things that I had a conversation with a client recently about, and this has just been coming up in themes, is the absence of pain is not joy, right? And so that
Mm.
comes up with a good colleague of mine has a book called I Tried to Travel It Away. And I'm a traveler, right? And so that certainly is not um, kind of a swipe at all at your goals, Leah. And I have similar, like, pack me in your bag, right? But sometimes we are, sometimes it's avoidance, right? And we want to be clear
Mhm.
about what that is. Um, but we get to change our minds. We get to be curious about what is it that would honor my life in this
Yeah.
season, right? Um, and do that, right, and give yourself permission to do that, right. But if we find that we're doing whatever it is, the new tradition, the new activity, because we want to avoid a thing, that's probably not our healing work. That is distraction. And
Yeah.
it works for a while, but the thing that we know about grief and trauma, and really any psychological injury, which most mental health challenges are, is that when we have quiet time, and we have downtime, voluntary or involuntarily, the body is geared towards survival. And so what we'll notice is that we will have the inability to sleep, or we'll be resting, right? And we won't wake up. It's not productive and restorative rest. So we'll wake up still feeling
Mm.
exhausted. We'll find, decreases in productivity. We'll find challenges with concentrating, right? Or even gaps in, memory. This anticipatory kind of grief that sits in our chest and in our stomachs and in our body. And so the reality is that the body is remembers, the body knows well before our conscious mind registers the thing that is unprocessed and not metabolized, right? And so I always just
Mm,
recommend that just check in with themselves.
Mhm.
Where's this need, this desire originating? Is it originating from a place that seeks joy and peace, or is it originating from a place that is seeking the absence of pain? Because oftentimes, if we get real clear and honest with ourselves, we are able to reconcile where we are, right? And there's a continuum we can float in and out of,
Mhm.
but being kind of mindfully living and being fully present in our own lives, because we're really good about showing up for other people and abandoning ourselves. Being fully present in our own lives requires that we sit with ourselves and understand the why behind the how and the what, right? And I think that is so important for those of us making meaning in the face of kind of loss, tradition, just
Mhm.
changing circumstances, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. I do what I call body scans.
Mm-hmm.
So especially when I am, because I suffer with, I wouldn't say depression. I have little sometimes depressive episodes, you call it,
Yeah,
whatever.
we all
Right.
have. Sure.
Right. And in those instances, like I said, I'm the buffalo. I'm walking into it because I don't want to stay in that space. I want to see what it is. So I really try to do a full body scan of where is this, where am I feeling this? What is causing this? Kind of so I can try and get to what the root is. And sometimes you'll be so surprised when you do that where it's actually coming from, right? Sometimes it was an experience that may have happened to me recently that triggered something from when I was a child. And I tell people, I don't consider a thing of being healed, a person of being healed. I feel because you can always be triggered back into that feeling. To me, healing is just like a journey. I'm still on this journey of healing. There's not really a destination. Like I said, to me, it's always I'm better than I was before I learned how to navigate the triggers and the things that happen so that I don't allow it to consume me. It doesn't become the everything and I get lost in that pain or that trauma, that old feeling, that old hurt, whatever, right? So I try to look at, what's going on in my body, in my mind, in my feelings, and what are things that I can do to help move myself forward from that, right? So that my bounce back is less, takes less and less time. You're not sitting in what I what I call just sitting in grief, waiting for somebody to come lend me a hand to get me to pull me out of it. Um, I've I've probably since I was really young, one of my friends was like, "You are always analyzing," and I never realized that that was another trauma response
Yes.
that I was having. Is I was always psychoanalyze. Like I was like, I don't need no therapist. I analyze myself. You don't have all the answers. And it's okay to get help, and it's okay to talk to somebody, because if you're constantly analyzing, there's a reason why you constantly feel the need to analyze. So just don't be scared to reach out and get the support that you need. There's nothing wrong with it. What I do like about the younger generation is that they are so open to getting the help they need. They will walk off a job, baby, like this is not healthy for me. Whereas my generation, you did not just walk up a job and you didn't have something else already lined up, ready to go. They'd be like,
Right.
I don't need this job. I'm out. This is not serving my happiness and my mental health. They don't got a job the first and they just go. And I
Yes.
love that. I love that they're not sitting in that pain and in the trauma, hoping that it's going to get better.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I absolutely love the evolution, right, of that, and of course it exists on a continuum because there's some that, you know, there's always this conversation around this kind of zero tolerance, or what many are calling kind of, oh, they have no work ethic, and I don't think that's the case, right? I think that there's different levels of there's different tolerance for working conditions that we had accepted as normal, right? Because
Mhm.
we didn't have voice, we didn't have agency, and in AI and remote work and all of these things are really kind of blowing the lid off of some of those restrictions that that forced us to learn to navigate the way that we did, right? And I think that's amazing. It reminds me of my I have an 8-year-old son. When he was in 6th grade, I got a call from the assistant principal, and I'm like, oh Lord, like he's never gotten in trouble in school, but why were you calling me? And she's like, hey, I was just wondering what you do for work. And I was like, what did he say? And he had said in carpool that homework violates his boundaries. And she wanted
The
to
kids have
That is violating my boundaries.
yeah. And I was like, and so I'm like, yeah, so I'm a therapist. She's like, yeah, that tracks. That tracks. She's like, yeah, let's talk about boundaries and self-care. And apparently you guys have we have 30 minutes of quiet time. It's really like I choose to take a nap. The kid they can do whatever they want to. It just you can't just disrupt someone else, right? And I instituted that's one of the things that we have in our house. He looks forward to it. He plays Minecraft, he'll play with his friends, whatever. He knows he has 30 dedicated minutes, and homework cuts into when he can start that time, and whatever, he was really looking forward to it. And
He
so
values his he
asked, like, what do I
values his self-care, and he that homework is cutting into my self-care
have?
time.
And I'm like, I don't disagree, son. I don't disagree, right? About the homework being is it really doing what it needs to do? But it definitely violates his self-care. And I just love that he has that language at a very very young age and a very early
yeah.
age. It's very protective of that individual time, but also our family time. He's very clear. He's like, mom, like you have to check your phone in, right? Like during our movie time and during our dinner time, he reminds me that I set the rule that we check our electronics in, and I have to be compliant as well. And so I love that.
Yes, I
Um,
love that.
but the other piece that's there, right, that really kind of loops into this conversation is I also had to normalize my children having agency and having voice, because in my household, I never would have been able to say, Mom, you have to put your phone down, or
Say it,
Mom,
doctor. Say
right?
it.
Like it would have been disrespectful. To this day, I don't say the word lie in front of my grandmother. I say, oh my God, you're not being truthful, or you're telling the story, because lie was a word I couldn't, right? Right? There's still
Mhm.
cannot. And I'm a full adult with kids, with credit, with a mortgage, like all the markers, right?
You paying the bills.
I'm
Yeah.
paying my bills and her bills, and still Still can't
Oh
go
yeah.
in that front living room. Okay, let's be very clear about the front living room that only the church
It's
man is
okay.
allowed in,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
You
You are
gotta have
not.
a healthy
Normalizing.
fear. Yes,
You go.
ma'am, a
You go
healthy
out the
fear.
kitchen door. You can't walk through my front room.
Hello, right? But renormalizing and actually not even renormalizing, but recreating a space
Mm,
where my kids, like, I want them to talk to me, right? I'm very interested in that conversation. I learned so much from them. And what I recognize as a parent is for many of those scripts that we received and that we inherited, one was to keep us safe, right? Like, no running outside,
mhm.
all the things we couldn't do in a store, right? How we had to behave in a store so we wouldn't look, all the things that we inherit as, Black kids growing up, because being a Black kid in and of itself is not the issue. It's being a Black kid and a Black woman and man in this
Yeah.
country that creates the structural and systemic kind of racial norms, right, around how we raise our kids. And so one of the conscious disruptions I had to make was from a parenting perspective. It's like, there's things that I still need to do to keep you safe when you leave my home, but home gets to be a soft place for you to land always, right? And that means that I can't expect for you to be able to advocate for yourself if someone is mistreating you at school or in the workplace, if I don't give you a place to practice
Mm,
advocacy and self-expression. And so my ego and my sense of control, because that's really what it is, right, has to take a back burner to developing children who know themselves, right, that know
mm,
themselves in my presence. And so I get to learn who each of my kids need me to be as a mom, because I'm open to that. Parenting is fluid, right?
yeah,
And our
yeah.
traditions and norms are adaptive, right? I don't want my kids having an adulthood to heal from a childhood I could have made safer. And I think that's the
Mhm.
challenge that shows up for us around holidays, is that we're walking into family traditions, norms, and customs where we have to be small again. We have to be childlike again, so as to honor the hierarchy that exists within family structures well into adulthood, right? Because the family
Mm,
doesn't pivot, right? And so I think those are the things that kind of example showed up for me, and that's one way that I get to honor the things that I receive, but also the things I didn't receive as a kid, is to be able to kind of navigate that gap differently with my kids. And I'm like, hey, y'all, well, this is trial and error. We're figuring this out together because this is new news to me, right? And being able to have, I think, the courage and the flexibility even to kind of parent and learn alongside them.
Yeah, I definitely think so I have conflicting thoughts of the concept of, because what you're bringing about is what brings me to like the gentle parenting thing, which I was not. I'm just going to be 100% honest. I was not. I don't necessarily. I buy into certain aspects of it. I do think children need to have a voice, and I think there's a way for you to introduce that and teach your children to have that voice in a respectful manner, right? To um, not think that having a voice means you don't get to still follow the rules and the guidelines and the boundaries and the things that are set up in the
Sure.
household and have discipline and all of that, right? And I think so. I think there, like you said, it's a continuum, right? I'm not overly gentle parent. I'm also not overly beat the hell out of your kids until, beat them into submission,
Sure.
right? And I think that as we do that and as we kind of change our traditions in our family, we have to find a way so that when we go back into the larger family dynamic, I don't play small for anybody. I don't care who you are, right? I will be respectful. I was always respectful to my grandmother and, to elders, but I'm a grown ass woman. Pay all these bills. I do help pay some of yours too sometimes, right? There's a level of respect that you have to give back. And I know it's harder with the older generation, something because that's just not who they were, right? But my daughter now, whereas when she was younger, she probably wouldn't have told me anything, right? Because it was definitely a do as I say, period. Right. But now, my daughter as an adult, we could talk about anything. And I think people don't, they still don't even understand that dynamic of, because I had to shift my view of her. And yes, you mourn the loss of, oh, that was my child, my young child, right? Still my child. She's a grown woman now, and I have to respect her as such. And I think being able to make that shift and understanding that growing up, I had to give her the ability to have a level of a voice so that she didn't grow up trying to adjust from trauma like I did. Because I didn't want that for my child. And you start to realize when you look at the way that you are and the way that you handle your children, is sometimes we go, when we've hit trauma, we either are going to revisit that on our kids, or we go so far left sometimes or so far right because we don't want to do that. Now we're not parenting and you're your kid's friend
Yes.
instead of their parent. And I didn't want that. So I was like, I have to, you know, I have to navigate and figure out how do I get a balance in that, to where I'm sometimes one of the only adults in the family some of the kids respect. And they
Yeah.
will never come to me and talk to me in a way that they talk to others. I also have some, like one of the kids in my family, one of my cousin's kids, we were just at the house and he was having a full on conversation with me. And they were like, he talks to you? I was like, yeah, he did. I said, that boy don't shut up. What are you talking about? He's been talking to me. He told me what he doesn't like when you guys call him this, and that he told me what he preferred to be called. And that's what I call him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Kids deserve respect too. Like we
Yeah.
said, they go through their own loss of things. And when you put an identity on them and they're trying to tell you, I would prefer if you called me this, or if you treated me this way, we have to listen and we have to give them that ability. And literally, he talked my head off for like 2 hours, and they were like, he don't really talk to us. I said, you guys don't listen, and you don't talk to him. You talk to him like he's a baby, and he has thoughts. He has his own mind. He has his own concepts of stuff. And sometimes we don't give them that chance and that opportunity to just be themselves in that space. And then we wonder why they grow up and they're maladjusted. They're, you know,
Sure.
they're having their own problems. And I've always tried to find a way that I didn't leave and dump all of my trauma that my grandmother just was trying to raise us, because my
Yeah.
mother died when I was young. So she just did her best. I don't
Yes.
blame her for anything, because I think at some point we have to take ownership of our healing and of our trajectory in our life. We can't continue to say, oh, this happened and that's why I'm the way I am. You're the way you are because you refuse to get help to resolve the hurt, the pain, the trauma, the whatever. I didn't want to live in that pain anymore. So I had to, what do you call it, make the decision, do, like you said, do that investment that takes stock of, is the change, or is staying here causing me more hurt and pain than to get the help and to live a better life and not make decisions out of that pain. So do you have tips for others that may be kind of sitting in that same space of, I want to do something different, but I'm not sure, how do I get out of this cycle of hurt and pain that I'm in?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the first thing is to acknowledge the hurt and the pain. Like what's at the root, what's at the core. So that's, one way that we can be in community with others is to be able to honor ourselves first, right? And so what is the pain? So acknowledging that, giving that space. Some of us have never said out loud the things that we've endured, right? And so we kind of keep moving through them, try to keep pushing, but they wherever you are, they show up, right?
Mhm.
And they change the way that we can even be in our bodies or be authentic with other people. What are your rules of engagement? again, we all have non-negotiables. We all have things that help us feel safe, that help us feel seen and heard. It may be, I have a nickname that my grandmother's the only person that's allowed to call me that, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
that is not my name, right? Um, and for me, a big part of that is about, people are comfortable when they feel like they know what to expect from you, which means that they might still treat you like the old version of you.
Yeah.
And that is dishonoring to you and who you are today, right? And so I think that piece is important. The other piece is, what do we want and need to communicate to the people that we are interacting with, right? And this is about boundary setting, but the other piece that I think happens a lot is that we have uncommunicated expectations that
Mm.
keeps gaps and unforgiveness and unhealedness, and it may be a misunderstanding. It may not, it may be willful ignorance, but we are sitting with assumptions until we check them, right? And so
Yeah.
what are the things that we are expecting from people that we think, well, I shouldn't have to teach you that? Yeah, but we all desire something different, right?
Mhm.
And you can't
Take
hold people to
that.
a standard that hasn't been communicated, right? Um, Especially when those standards change. My standards are completely different as an individual as
Mhm.
opposed to as a mom. I have
Mm.
almost a zero tolerance policy when it comes to my kids, right? My kids and my
Yeah.
grandmother. I have a different level of tolerance if you're talking to a Jetta, right? Because there's not a whole lot of things that bother me, that upset me, but I have zero understanding when it comes to my kids. So I'm going to
Lose your
communicate
mind. Lose your mind.
the
All of it.
first time, right? The first time I'm going to communicate. The second time I'm going to reinforce, right?
Good.
And you get two different people, right? Depending, and you have choice.
You have a choice.
Why you
You
talk
have
about
a
my
choice.
life, doctor? Why? Why?
You have a choice in which version of me you get. Yes.
Yes.
And
That
so I
part.
think those are some things that are so important. And especially when it comes to kind of this holiday season, right? Particularly, um, what are the things that you need, right? In order to show up in space and be in community. And that may mean that you need to drive yourself so that you have the room and the freedom to leave when you need to, right? It may mean
Mm.
that, the outfit that you wear, right? I might need to dress down because dressing up is actually not for me, it's for someone else. So, what
Mhm.
allows the most authentic and cared for version of yourself to show up, right? That also may mean that you do, there's some things that we do on, the day before a holiday, because that's when I have energy, capacity, and the willingness, right?
Hmm.
Because sometimes we're doing things because we should, as opposed to we ought to. And so I'd rather you kind of check that against, is this something I ought to do? Because should is an expectation, right? That may not even belong to you. So I always like to filter whatever my behavior or actions against the thing. Does this belong to me, or is this something that I've inherited from family, from society, from whomever, but does
Yes.
it belong to me? Because I don't have to accept every invitation that's offered, right?
Got a
And I
choice.
think the last thing is that, you know um this I think throws some of my members of my family off, but I think they've in the beginning they are used to it now. Is I say no thank you. I've stopped apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry, blah blah blah. I'm not. When you invite me to something or issues, even if it's a conversation or whatever it is, my response, if it doesn't align for me, is no. No thank you, right? And no is good enough. No is a complete sentence.
Mhm.
And those are some things for us to have practice, and be clear about, who does that belong to? How do I want to show up or not, right? Both of those are
Yeah.
allowed and okay. um, what are my non-negotiables, and have I communicated those, right? And so I think those pieces are so important as we navigate time with family and intentional time without, right? And I think that is, um, those are some things that I found to be helpful for many of my clients.
And I
And so,
think, oh, go ahead.
no, I just saying it applies to me as well, right?
Yeah, and one of the things that I really like is the uncommunicated boundaries, because I think there are so many people who not necessarily that they're scared to say it, but like you said, sometimes it's an elder and you grew up where you did not address elders in that manner, and people are used to seeing yesterday you. This is I'm not 12 years old anymore. I'm not 15 years old anymore.
Mhm.
And we we don't address it, but we still want to be seen as who we are. And I think there are ways, and it takes time. It's not You're not going to be comfortable doing it the first time, but I will wholeheartedly say no thank you. And I think that's funny that you use that, because I do that as well. No thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, because
I,
I know there are certain things that I know if I go into that situation, there's a trigger that's going to happen. And
Mhm.
sometimes it isn't that people are being malicious. It's just they're used to interacting and engaging with you on a different level. And I'm no longer that person, I'm not going to continue to put myself in situations that I know may not be helpful for me.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
And I say, no, no, thank you. I'm good.
I
I'm
got
good.
something for
Thank
that.
you. You know what I mean? But thank you for thinking of me and inviting me into whatever. But no, thank you. I'm good.
Yes.
I got
And
something for that. It's the my cousin says I'm gonna do a sharonda. I'm like, what you mean? What am I a verb now? What is that? She's like, cause you love from a distance and you just because it's what like your son said, doctor, about boundaries and stuff like that. If I even feel like it's about to be some BS, I love you, but I'm gonna be over here. I'm gonna love you totally from a distance because I can't afford to have you inside my, inner circle and taking up real estate in my mind because you want to bring drama that I'm not participating in. I love you, but I'm gonna be over here. So that's the my equivalent of no, thank you.
Yes.
We're not doing that.
absolutely.
And that
Period.
can be done with in love and without judgment, right? But
Yes.
Absolutely, it's
about
it's about your peace.
absolutely. And it's about
There-
not abandoning yourself because I think we're nurturers and and that can naturally lead you to be a people pleaser. And then the other piece that is the reality is that we don't want to be excluded, right? Like totally, because if you say no to one thing, people are like, oh, she's not, and then they don't invite you to other things. And we may not like no one wants to be excluded, right? We
Right.
want to be a part of, even when we have boundaries. Like, hey, like I'll drop y'all off at the club, but I'm not going. And I used to be the cousin, like, hey, where we going? Right? I'm no longer the cousin, right? My check knee light is on now. I'm not going, right? I got asthma. I'm not going, right? And now I have like I'll drop y'all off, and I can even be the designated driver, but I'm also not going, right? And that was a relearning because I absolutely was the one that was like, okay, so like we'll just go home, shower, and then go to work afterwards, right? I, I am no longer, right? Like now,
Oh, why you talk
I
about our
listen,
life, doctor,
listen,
Right.
again?
Because
now,
Oh,
when I tell you I'll be out, if I'm going out anywhere, I'm leaving my house about 6:30. So by 9:30, 10, I'm already back home. I was like, oh my God, I'm officially the old people. And I love it. And I
listen,
understand why they do it. I was like, I was missing out on this my whole life.
listen,
man.
day
Mm.
party me, okay? It doesn't day party me because anything after 6, I'm gonna need a nap, right? Like absolutely. So I am not the
Yes,
fun cousin, but I'm definitely the passport cousin, okay? So you just need to know this about me. I'm definitely not going, right? And I'll see you tomorrow, right? I'll see you
that's
tomorrow.
it.
Not too early. Not too early. I'll
Right.
see you in the
Don't
two
call me.
digits
Don't call me
tomorrow.
at 7 o'clock. I'm not gonna answer.
Don't call me before the two digits, okay? If the two digits haven't started, I'm phone another friend, right? And so again, it's about
Get
communicating
somebody else to
boundaries
do it.
100%, 100%, right?
I am in
Oh,
total agreement.
Yes, 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 yes.
Well, we
But I,
have come to the end of our time. Oh my gosh.
oh my gosh,
Yes,
yes,
yes.
goodness.
It has been an hour, and I know Dr. Ajetta has a lot to do. Uh, and I thank you so much. So,
absolutely.
again, let the people know where they can get that
Hmm.
fabulous book.
Absolutely. So if you go to ajetarobinson.com/book, if you want a signed copy, it'll come directly from our fulfillment team. That's where you can grab that book. You also can grab it on Amazon. It has been sold in every single continent.
Way to
And so
go.
you can get a copy of the book by either going to
Mhm.
directly or going directly to Amazon. And I'd love to stay connected with, obviously with you all as well as with your followers. I'm Dr. Ajetta Robinson on all platforms. My name is too unique for me to hide. So if you run across it, just look for this face.
Yes. Make sure
Wow.
go to our website, JennaRobinson.com. I'm about to say doctor, and check her out. She's fabulous, as you guys can see from
Absolutely.
today. Uh, and I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. We actually kind of did still talk about the family conflict. You see,
Yes.
we wove it all the way back in, but I think it was
Yes.
such a conversation that needed to be had, and that somebody out there is going to listen and they're going to be helped and they're going to realize, wow, maybe I do deserve a little bit better than what I've been giving myself or allowing others to give me. And so let me do what I need to do, get the help so that I can live my best life. Because that's what we're all about here. We are all about living our best lives. So, with that, I want to thank y'all for tuning in to the Wake Up Happy Sis show with your host, Leanne Dulce and Sharonda Seeley, and our special guest, Dr. Jetta Robinson. And we will be back on Monday. Monday is a special show, y'all, because it's somebody's birthday. So, let me get my fan out. So
She
y'all
talk about
know,
me. She talk about me.
yes, we've got a special show. We're gonna be talking about faith, and we're also going to be doing a little celebration for Sharonda's birthday. There's likely to be a giveaway or something. You never know. So make sure that you tune in live 10 a.m. on Monday and join us. So thank you again, Dr. Jenna.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And y'all have the day you're meant to have. Because remember, you can't control what other people do. You can always control how you respond and react. Have a blessed one.
Have a good one.
Thank you for tuning in for